those of you that have registered for the conference, kindly tune in as the dialogue is going on. At some moment, we shall display a QR code which shall give you the program as we start off tomorrow. I can already say that we shall begin at 8 to 9 we shall be registering, and at 9 we shall begin fully. So I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate especially our sponsors. The week has gotten several activities, and we have had very many people coming together to make sure that we have a good event. They are displayed there. We have UN Habitat, we have GIZ, we have, of course, Makerere University, the Land Portal. If you do not know about the Land Portal, simply Google Land Portal and you catch up with everything that has been happening during the week. Electricity Regulatory Authority, RCMRD, EcoCause, Subnet, ISU, and SRB are all our partners. If I haven't mentioned some of them, please just look out to the screen and help us appreciate them when you get to them in any forum. I would like to appreciate the panelists even before they take the floor for having accepted to be a part of the conference and to spare this afternoon to edify you on climate change and the implications regarding land administration. So, Dr. Ronald, without wasting a bit of more time, please continue with the program.
A round of applause to Dr. Lydia Mazkayondo, the head of Department of Geomatics and Land Management. Again, welcome here. I'm going to invite Mr. Alan Mugisha, who is going to moderate this public dialogue, to come, and he will introduce the panelists, and they will join us on the podium, and then we'll be able to start. Mr. Alan Mugisha is a registered valuation surveyor, but is also an advocate of the High Court of Uganda. He has a wealth of experience, and he will tell you more about himself. Alan?
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much, the organizers of this conference. Thank you very much, members, for being here this afternoon. My name is Alan Mugisha. I am a valuation practitioner, but I call myself a land economist. I am also an advocate of the High Court. I am also an alumni of a Sami Business School, where I pursued a master's in business administration, and I'm now a student at Arthur University pursuing a PhD in human settlements and urban wealth creation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to introduce our panelists today. I'll start with none other than Dr. David Silva. Please, as you approach. Dr. Silva is a senior lecturer and a land surveyor with extensive experience in geospatial technologies and land administration, currently serving as the head of the Department of the Geospatial and Space Technology Unit at the University of Nairobi. Glad to have you here, Dr. Silva. I've reserved a little bit of his introduction because I'm sure he's going to have an opportunity to talk himself once he comes in. Next is Ms. Martha Mugarura, who is our Assistant Commissioner for Urban Development at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. You're not clapping, ladies and gentlemen. These people are going to share with us their minds today. Martha is an accomplished urban planner and Assistant Commissioner for Urban Development at the Ministry with 18 years of experience. She's got a bachelor's degree in urban planning from Makerere University and a postgraduate diploma in urban governance and management from UMI, and a master's degree in urban management from IHS, which is the Institute of Housing and Urban Development Services of Erasmus University in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Dr. Ivan Bamweyana is a lecturer at our good Department of Geomatics and Land Management. Is a researcher at the department, and he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in surveying and a master's degree in geoinformation science and technology from Makerere University, and a master's of business administration from Uganda Management Institute, and a PhD, ladies and gentlemen, in geomatics from Makerere University. Last but not least today, we have Ms. Joanita Babidie, the co-founder of Girls for Climate Action and a leader, a coalition leader of the UN Women Youth Action Coalition. Joanita also trains young greenpreneurs to start green innovations and scale them. And over the years, she has fought for land rights and ownership for communities on margins. And she serves as the UN Women Youth Action Coalition leader under the Generation Equality and Feminism Action for Climate Justice Movement. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our panel. And a big round of applause for all the people on this panel here. And diving into it, our panel is going to be structured as follows. We're going to have a brief chat, thematic discussion by each of these individuals who will be calling on one by one according to the program. They will then talk about what they believe is trending, a trending discussion that links to our conference theme today, and then to your expectations and those of the conference organizers. Each of them will speak for 15 minutes, after which we shall engage the panel from my perspective, but also allowing you to also ask a few questions directly to panel members. And after that, we shall then be inviting the next person and just doing the same thing until we exhaust all the 4 speakers. At which point, we shall then have a general discussion as the audience will be asking freely on issues that have, they believe have come up, or issues that ought to have come up, or issues that are inadvisory to be considered to be discussed at a forum like this one. And then after which, I will give them each a minute or two to wrap up their contribution for the day. And then I will invite the rapporteur touring team to share with me their notes on the way forward and resolutions of this dialogue. I thank you very much. And at this particular time, allow me to invite, I hope your speaker is working, Dr. Siliba, just to do a double check. And maybe the rest of you can also be doing that in the meantime to make sure that you are able to reach audibly to everyone in this room. So, Dr. David, allow me to use your first name if you don't mind. Please, if you don't mind, give us an overview of the land administration practices in your perspective, within your practice, within your country, but also what you think is relevant for the conference today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think I've been introduced. Perhaps as part of the introduction, I would add 1 or 2 more aspects that in addition to my roles at the university, outside of the university, I also serve as a member of the Land Surveyors Board in Kenya. And also within and beyond the university, I'm an associate of a center that we call Center of Excellency in Land Acquisition and Resettlement Studies. So I thought that is important because it ties in with the topic for this afternoon. So I have been asked to give a general overview of land administration practices. And as you may have expected in the program, I'm actually, I wasn't there initially in the program, and this was because of circumstances. In place of Dr. Agnes Masumbi, who was to speak to this topic. But then circumstances again also came to this point that I am the one to do it. So an overview of land administration. So land administration, as we generally know, entails the recognition, recording, and dissemination of information related to land tenure otherwise land rights as we generally say. Things to do with land value, we need to know the value of that land. Land use planning, and even development. Because these various activities have an impact on the overall attainment or achievement of our development goals. So I think for the purpose of classroom, so there are those 4 key components of land administration which give a more holistic perspective of what land administration is, and that in the recent years has really made an impact to the manner in which our land administration systems are organized. Previously, before this perspective was introduced, across Africa and much of the world, the focus was largely on land tenure and not on these other things. In fact, if you check on the land administration systems of the most countries in the world, you would find that the manner in which these various aspects of land administration were managed were independent of one another, and that eventually led to a situation whereby we don't treat land administration as one entity. Yeah, so in land administration, for it to be effective, because land administration is really the tool that we use to implement land management policies, there are a number of things that we need to have in place. Number one, we need to have a coherent policy and legislative framework. So in other words, the policy has to speak to or be aligned with the land laws, otherwise legislation. And as you have observed, for those of you who have followed the developments in the land policy arena in Africa, there is a time when much of the focus was on the development of land policies across our countries. So some of the countries in Africa have the first drafts of their land policies. Others are at the point of reviewing their land policies. So land, I mean, the legislative and legal framework is such an important component. Of course, that's not to leave out the institutional framework key, because it is at the institutions that these policies, that these laws are implemented. And as you can relate to your particular experiences, when the institutions are not aligned, are not coherently operating, you find that there is a lot of disconnect, and eventually we do not achieve the intended development. Now, why we have to ensure that we organize our land administration systems is it is in response to the sustainable development aspirations. Yeah? Otherwise, if we had no business of improving our lives, we wouldn't bother. But the sustainable development goals, as you know them, there are particular goals that speak to or that require land administration or effective land administration. And in particular, the sustainable goal number 1, which in one of its targets requires that at the end of the day, or as we do our development efforts, we ensure that there is equitable rights and land development. So I'm sure in the last 2 days and in most similar fora, we have been emphasizing the equity in terms of the rights, land rights to the various groups. And I think over the years we focused on women, children. We have households where we only have children. We have vulnerable groups, older people. Yeah, I'm sure you have heard stories whereby some young people start making allegations that these older people within our village are, is it wizards and witches? So they go ahead and they try to ban them. But ultimately what they want is to take a hold of the land that they own. Then another one, which has become equally important, and I think it is gaining a lot of focus, is that one of refugees. Yeah, refugees, it's another serious one, that because the people by circumstances have been, let me use this expression, have been uprooted from their land and they are hosted in other countries. The human rights demand that we treat them as human beings, and therefore, of course, initially in most establishments of refugee settlements, not much thought was given to the planning and such like. But lately, actually, it is now becoming a serious issue that we plan for refugee settlements, because those refugees, as we have them in our countries, they interact with the local communities, and we are all aspiring for sustainable development. Now, I hope you can. Oh.
5 minutes. Don't worry.
Right. So let me now try to bring in the aspect of climate change into this whole subject of land administration. It is another new policy issue that has become important, that we need to treat it with the seriousness it deserves. Because if we continue with the land administration practices or land management practices that we have already had, we may not achieve the sustainable development. So climate change is caused by natural events, and also on the other hand, by human activities. Yeah, human activities are considered to be significant when it comes to climate change, and as citizens of our various countries, from various sectors, agriculture, water, we make some interventions to ensure that we make some land management practices that do not degrade land so much. Yeah, so for example, I think now I'll give a quick examples of how within our land administration, the cases of climate change. People live in fragile ecosystems, wetlands. So the wetlands have been degraded. People live because they don't have property rights. They settle on the lowlands, especially in the cities. You'll find most of our informal settlements in the downstream, where there is where sometimes when it floods, they are vulnerable. We had a serious case in Nairobi, I think last year. You can check when we had the long rains. Yeah, so when the floods come, they can easily sweep away all that. Then, of course, by natural events, we have had our, maybe in Uganda it might not be a serious case, but in Kenya it is, what we call agroecological zoning. So what we used to know as productive agroecological zones have now changed. They are no longer productive as they used to be. And therefore, we need to have land management, land administration practices that factors that. For example, in Kenya, there was a proposal to prescribe the maximum, minimum land holding, or when it comes to subdivision. And that is a key factor. For example, in areas that are considered to be arid, it makes no sense to do a subdivision of 1 meter, 50 by 50, as they say, right? So that should inform any land policy. But of course, we didn't get to achieve this, but it is a policy proposal. Then related to climate change because of the natural events, we have had some studies in the university. One particular that I will mention, a student who did a study on future forward. I don't know, it may sound like a misnomer, future and then forward, based approach to optimizing agriculture. In other words, you predict the scenario in some 20, 30 years. So then whatever agricultural practices you do now are responsive to the expected situation. So these studies, though, they are carried within a university and not directly connected to land administration sector. And therefore, maybe in conclusion, because of time, I really would have said a lot more, is that various sectors carry out research. They prepare policy briefs. These policy briefs should be incorporated in the main land policy so that we don't have gaps that we currently have, because all the sectors within the land management framework are not working together. So, and in closing, did I say in conclusion and now in closing? So this should be the last statement that I should say. As we review our policies, we should be alive to the effects of climate change and make proposals or provisions on how to mainstream such strategies in our policies.
Thank you very much. Ivan, a big round of applause for Ivan. I would like, with the permission of the organizers, to have a slight change. I've just noticed with the pattern I mentioned before of how this is going to flow, that the last speaker would actually speak almost an hour from now. And being an afternoon after a big lunch, we might have a problem of someone falling from their seat onto the floor. So I'm going to try and link this up, but still give each of you the opportunity for your Q&A from members of the audience and myself. Ms. Babidie, you've heard about the overview from Ivan. Ivan seems to say that our policy is in place, our legislation is in place. He says that we seem to be sensitive to what should or should not be done, in spite of the challenges we're having with time eating at some of the assumptions we made before. For instance, what was agro-land before is now exhausted, that's no longer as effective as it is. You're coming up with the notion that there seems to be still a substantial gender imbalance and inequity in regards to land administration. But then also you seem to say that in that particular imbalance, a climate change aspect is also accelerating it. Can you give us some of your findings over the years, and what are some of the initiatives that you found successful in promoting gender equity in general? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here. I love that we've started this conversation, and this conversation is bringing different people in the room to just listen to land, gender, and climate. I feel like it's a very important time to just discuss that. When you talk about land as a resource, before I even go into examples and what's happening and how women, girls, and different vulnerable groups of people are affected, I'd love to also say that land is one of the things that are linking us to not only our heritage or culture, but also it supports a lot of livelihoods. If we are here and all of these things that are happening, commercial buildings, different businesses that are running, it's basically land. But now when you look at it at a profit perspective, it's different. But for the women in the communities, it's even more, what can I say, it's worse. So when you talk about land in East Africa, we are talking about identity, we are talking about culture, we are talking about livelihood, and now we are talking about climate resilience. Now, when women do not have land, it means they can't be resilient to climate change. And we've said it's an emergency, but are we carrying all of us within the entire spectrum of where is everybody? When we talk about climate, we talk about land, and we talk about the different uses of land. So just to give also an overview of what's happening with the different tenure systems or land administration systems, you know that right now when you talk about customary land, most of the women do not have this documented. They're just depending on land that is owned by their husbands. Now, the husbands in the areas where I work, mainly Busoga region, Karamoja region, the men are giving women land on the margins, going back to your point. And the marginal lands are the lands that are not productive. Now, what that means is that the women are going to grow food on the marginal lands. Chances are very high that they will not be as productive as they would have been. But now with the new pests, new diseases, soil infertility, and all of the things that humans are doing on climate and environment, it's even hitting them the most. And now, when you talk about the developments that are happening in wetlands, the first speaker has spoken about the floodplains, where people that do not have resources are actually moving to. Now, when we take over these wetlands, it means that the people that are actually staying in these floodplains are women, are children, or refugees, because they do not have a place to go. And now, of course, we also have to do our work as land administrators, as fiscal planners, as engineers, as surveyors. We have to do our work. So that means that NEMA, for example, will come and take away these people from the areas where they are, and they don't have anywhere to go. The vulnerability just keeps on building up, because of one action of not letting women have documentation, not letting women have governance over land, control, because land is a very huge resource, not only for men, but also for the women. And also we know that in East Africa, our biggest GDP is coming from agriculture. And sadly, women form 80% of people in the agriculture sector, and they're doing subsistence farming. However, 20% of the women, less than 20% of the women own the land. What that means is that they are struggling to even produce what to give to communities. So when we talk about land administration, as we are doing the practices that we are doing, it's very imperative for us to think about the different levels of vulnerability as we are planning for land. I know that also most times we are having people coming into communities, and all the meetings that we are inviting, let me just first give an example. So you go to a community, you call for a meeting at 10 a.m. When you call for a meeting at 10 a.m. about land, which is a very important aspect for these women, they're in the gardens, trying to make unproductive land productive. Now at 10 a.m., the men are actually home. They'll be the ones to come into your meetings, because they have the privilege, because the systems have made them be present for that particular meeting. Now, when you have all these discussions, the land use planning, all the plannings that you're going to do, community-based adaptation, new practices, new land models, and things like that, the men will have that information more than the women. So at 4 p.m. when I come back from the garden, I'm already tired. The men will not even share this information. So it means it's important for us to also be cognizant of these small things that make women be in situations of vulnerability. Being vulnerable to something is not born. You are put into that situation because of the system, and right now we are talking about the patriarchal system. it's because of the system that's putting in that situation of vulnerability. It's very important for us to recognize that as we are starting to plan for the communities. It's very important for us to bring all of these people in the room. So I would love to also just let everyone know that when we are getting into the planning, the land use planning, and understanding all these new models that are coming up, understanding that climate change is affecting women and children disproportionately. And all those factors are coming from a resource, which is land. Of course, there are also different other resources. But right now, land. It can either build their resilience or destroy them. But the two extremes can only happen depending on how we have situationed them to be. So, again, just to summarize this, I would love to say that the different administration systems should recognize that women and girls are more vulnerable, first of all. And two, it's important to engage them in the planning. And three, it's important not only to engage them in the planning, but also decision making. We've talked about the frameworks, we've talked about the policies. How are they linking gender? Or are we working in silos and letting gender department work alone, climate department work alone, and us land people will also work alone? But how do we create a way of working together? Because these are issues that are interlinking and they affect various people differently. And so when we talk about trying to bring this conversation to life, is first of all trying to recognize that departments or sectors don't have to work in silos, but work together. It's from that we shall also have gender disaggregated data to back up the plannings that we have to do. Because without data, we cannot plan better. Without data, we cannot figure out who is more vulnerable to this situation. So, again, getting involved and interested in how gender gets into the entire conversation as we are trying to do policies, but also not leaving the people that are supposed to be in the room, but bringing them in the room to do the decision making, to do the policy frameworks, to do all of these things, because they understand better. So in communities where we work, we've tried as much as possible to do a lot of sensitization for women to know that it's their right to own land. Now, in as much as we say that, we also know that most times when they come into institutions where they're supposed to get their land documented, it's also different. So for me, it's very, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's very exciting to be speaking to people that are supposed to make work easy for the women when they come to register their lands, or documentation, and things like that. And also seeing so many evictions that are happening. We've tried to, as much as possible, educate women on compensation. But also because the men are the ones saying they own the land, the compensation goes direct to the husbands. So at that point, how are we trying to strike a balance to know that in as much as we've carried, we want to do compensation for a certain community, we're also trying to count on the fact that we want them to think through, is the woman involved in this entire situation? Are they supposed to own a part of that? And it's very commendable that, Uganda has started to do, to allow women to do registration on customary land. I know Tanzania has also started to do a lot of planning with communities on land, because pastorists were still complaining, but right now they are trying to own land and try to engage as much as possible. So just continuing with the practices, but also, again, at the back of our minds to always know, how do we link gender, climate, and land administration systems, and continuously remind ourselves that we don't have to work in silos. We have to bring everyone in the room, especially those that are more vulnerable, and also be very cognizant of the ecosystems that are, the commons that are happening in our communities. How are people sharing them? Because they are owned communally, but who is really leading on the leadership structure? Is the subcommittee composed of only men for a communal land or communal resource, or are there women on that particular thing? So just to be cognizant of that. So I'll end there with my submission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A big round of applause for Ms. Joanita. Martha, I'd like to turn to you. The two previous speakers have intimated an aspect of policy and legal framework. My understanding is that this country in particular is not short of policy, is not short of legislation at whatever levels and whatever hierarchy. Just take us through your understanding of this. Is it the lack of policy? Is it the lack of legislation? Is it the knowledge of this legislation among other people or amongst many users? Or are there any other challenges that you've come across in as far as land policy and legal framework is that in this country? And maybe if you could also consider an aspect of climate resilience. Do you find adequate room in the current policy and law that would accommodate the, climate resilience, or are you a champion of a review to incorporate climate resilience? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan, for your question. And thank you to the audience and Makerere University for inviting me to speak on behalf of the policy setting institution, which is Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, that sets policy on land, on housing, and on urban development. I would like to start by first unpacking the question that is for today's conference, which is, can land administration systems adapt to climate change while promoting sustainability? Because with that question, we will see later on if policy has been involved in this process. So I attempted to unpack land administration systems, because we know systems are made of components. The first component from the perspective of land is the registries, the land registry which we have. We also have the cadasters, which include the mapping of all the lands, and then we have the spatial planning. I am a spatial planner myself. So we have the land use planning, we have the cadasters, and definitely the land records. These systems have been evolving since time immemorial, but now there is a shift. There is an impact on how these components are working. This shift has been occasioned by climate change. So therefore, the question for me would be the intersection of these components of this system, the land administration system, with the climate changes or the risks that we are now faced due to climate change. So when it comes to the issue of climate change, we all understand, or maybe we feel it on a day-to-day basis. Today it's very hot. Yesterday particularly, the sun was shining, but it was a bit windy. Those simple, I would call them changes that you can feel in your body or in your environment, are really a testament of the changing climate. But the actual risks that we are faced with as a result of climate change are the risk to flooding, the risk to drought, and the risk to other factors like excessive heat. We did have a very hot season at the beginning of this year, if you felt it a bit. And what does this mean on land? The first speaker talked about the human activities that actually are contributing to these changes. We are building so very fast, we are urbanizing at a very high rate, and all this consumes resources like water, like the soil which we use in the bricks, and also the materials that are extracted from the natural environment, the wood, and all that contributes to the climatic changes that we have. So when it comes to addressing all these issues, we stand on policy. Policy is a guide. It is the first guiding instrument on how we need to shape and formulate our development. So in terms of policy, Alan and colleagues, we are not short of policy. This country has, I think in the Nigerian slang, we have plenty policy, plenty policy. And I'll start with the National Climate Change Policy of 2015. This is a framework that integrates the two streams of climate change, which is adaptation and mitigation, into our land use planning and administration and management. It has guided. Are we doing enough to follow that guidance? That would be the question to us. We also have the land policy, which was formulated in 2013 and is currently under review. Why? Because we have seen that some of the guidance that was given previously did not take into account the climate effects that we now face today, or that were being faced but we actually could not put a finger to them. So yes, review of policy and existing policy is the way we should go. We also have the national urban policy, and this is the one that guides my daily work. This urban policy has made mention of how we need to promote spatially integrated urban development, which means that as we develop, we take good care of our environment, we consider that we have resources for now and in the future, that sustainability component, and that we do not develop in a manner that brings also the environment in disrepute. For instance, if it is in a housing area and we do not have measures on solid waste management, then the environment is now is not fit for human habitation. So we also guide on that at that level. We also have guidance in that policy on urban sprawl. Urban sprawl is that organic development beyond a certain planning limit. We have to plan within, we plan an organized setting, we plan for settlement within limited areas so that we can fix everything and have economies of scale. But when we don't plan the area before the settlement, then it starts to grow beyond those boundaries, and that is what we call urban sprawl. But we are saying in this policy we need to manage urban sprawl because it goes into the green areas where our natural resources are. The water front areas, we have the wetland areas, and we find settlements deeply embedded in a wetland system, and that is not right. It deprives us of water, it deprives us of the services of wetlands, which are to manage flooding and also water retention. And so we start to walk backwards in terms of development because we are destroying the environment. We have other policies, of course, that are outside of the realm of spatial planning, but which as government have guided. We have the National Environment Management Policy and also the Environment Act. These ones have given mandate to government agencies and even to the private sector to conduct environment impact assessments as a basis for approval of land use change. We are saying that as we develop, we are going to change the land use that we had before. We had probably an open space, but we now want to develop it into maybe a housing estate. We must first conduct an environment impact assessment to see to what extent are we going to take away what nature has given us and put this artificial outfit in this place, but how can we still bring back the environmental component to it, because we can't live without the green. These are the lungs for us in the urban setting. So that EIA guides on how we would develop, but how we would mitigate the impacts of the development from an environmental perspective. And that is given by the Environment Policy and the Environment Act. What has really, in the most recent years, what has really come into confrontation with the people in development is wetlands. We have seen wetlands encroached on very heavily in urban areas under the pretext that the land is cheap. But unfortunately, the land under wetlands is protected by government under the Wetlands Management Act. It is erroneous that parcels of land have been created in wetlands. It is very erroneous. And that means that the cadastral system has malfunctioned in that regard. But the protective measures under that legal framework, the Wetlands Management Act, are there. So the question is, how have we, how have we changed the measures in there? That is on our own accord. But in terms of the legal guidance, it is given. We also have the forest policy and the the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act. This is very important because forests have a special category of preservation and conservation within our environment. So we advocate for forests even within the peri-urban areas of cities and municipalities. We advocate for even tree lots within the cities because the tree cover brings out the greening aspect. It also helps to change the microclimate. These are just science terms to mean the cooling effect within the urban area. That's why you find when you walk along streets that have trees, that are lined with trees, it is more bearable than if you walk along a street that has no trees. You feel the heat, you can't see very well, and that is what we call the urban heat island. So if you compare areas that have trees within the urban setting and areas that don't have, really the thermal comfort is different in those areas. So this tree policy and the act is very important. It also affects us in terms of land administration, and we must integrate this into our land administration systems. Because I had earlier spoken to the issue of climate change and how it is affecting us in terms of settlement, the policy on disaster is very important. The disaster risk reduction policy, it has highlighted the land use planning as a critical entry point for reducing disaster. And this means that we need to change the practice, how we are planning for our land use. Are we just preparing land use plans only for settlement, only for infrastructure, only for industry, and nothing for the environment? That is what is land use planning. It consists of all the different types of land use that we all know about. But there seems to be a heavy a preference for the all other, or would call them the gray type of land uses, but very little for the blue and very little for the green land use. And this has to change because the disaster management, the disaster risk reduction policy is saying we can only mitigate the risks if we infuse some green element into our development agenda. And finally, I know this may not be a policy that has been written and approved by cabinet, but it's an all of government policy, the parish development model. It has also provided for improved land productivity through climate resilient agricultural practices at the grassroots levels. So all these are policies rich in guidance, rich in a perspective of how we should manage our land and how we should transform our development. But the question is, are we doing these in practice? Are we actually building resilience? So I would like to end with this question that I posed to us. Resilience, first, the statement I would like to give is that resilience requires that we treat land not just as a fixed asset, but as a dynamic system. As a system with various components that include the land, the infrastructure, the housing, the tenure, all that has to be inclusive and mindful of the changing climate realities. So the question on policy, for me, I think I have answered, is that the policy is shifting, and it's shifting from reactionary to proactive, because most of the policies that are now under review by government have to be risk sensitive, have to be gender inclusive, and definitely are taking into consideration climate concerns. Thank you.
Martha and all the other speakers, just for you to prepare adequately for your next round of questions, I'll just give you a hint into what I'll be asking about. And for Dr. Siriba, this is before I invite Ivan, haven't forgotten you. Dr. Siriba, I would like you to address specifically the aspects, that the opportunities that you think are there for land administration in the era of climate change. So please think about that. And then for Joanita, your round of question would be in illustrating to the audience here what you think a successful initiative looks like in improving gender equality and also ensuring at the same time that we have got climate resilience in land exploitation in general. And exploitation, I mean that positively. And then for Martha, your question would be, we've heard about policy quite a bit. Even just a few you've been able to mention. I was able to almost cover up all my 5 fingers on my 2 hands, or rather my 10 fingers on my 2 hands. So the question then is, if we have all the policy, and probably we have the law that is accompanying this policy for enforcement purposes, then in your humble view, what is your call to action for members in this audience, and also what contribution can the other stakeholders make? Ivan, everyone is talking about technology being the silver bullet to all our problems. Of recent, they talk about AI and the state being able to police us in every other way that we're able to. Martha has intimated to you that there are challenges to do with big data management, and land spatial information is one of them. You know that this government struggled a few years ago to put an LIS system, land information system, which is in place. You also know that a few environmental watchdogs have done their best work in going as far as demarcating wetlands, and yet again we're still having challenges of individuals putting a lot of pressure and pain, for that matter, to the land enforcement teams across the country in ensuring that we don't go astray in utilizing marginal lands and so on and so forth. So, in your view, give us an insight into how you think emerging technologies might be of great help to all of us in improving, first of all, monitoring and also efficiency and effectiveness of land administration in general, with particular, regard to being a police or being a watchdog or being a guard towards the climate change that is a big threat to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. First of all, I'm very happy that we are at a moment in time where we are subjecting land administration and land governance to technology. We all know that this particular area has always been a laggard. It comes in last when it comes to technology. It's the last to adopt. Allow me come from a perspective where I believe that land is no longer a commodity. It's no longer a map. It's no longer a boundary, but it's our lifeline. It's one where we grow our crops, our food. It's where we do our agriculture. It's where we restore and maintain our culture. And it's being challenged by the dynamics of climate change that range from erratic rainfall, that range from the hazards of landslides and the likes. And so we meet at an intersection where we have technology. Let me just pick one pitch of this technology. Let's talk AI and blockchain, because we cannot discuss all the technology. But AI is currently on the agenda of what everyone has. And there's a lot of technology we can discuss. But why should we, especially in Africa, always be the ones to catch up? So allow me sound sci-fi, but I would love to leapfrog us into what we can do better, or what the other world systems may also have to copy from us. So we've had blockchain technology, and I've heard that the government is giving it a chance. And for those of you who may not know, blockchain technology makes it difficult to alter a transaction in a very simple way that it communicates to multiple computers, and any particular piece of data that is moved is a block, and then it is linked to the next block when data is added to it and moved, in essence making a blockchain. So most of you have heard about these things probably in cryptocurrencies, because you're making many transactions and then they will encrypt your transaction line and then it will become blockchain. Okay, so if we are to borrow from another world to improve our world, then we have to realize what are the advantages. We see that one, there is security. Every transaction becomes a fingerprint of its own. It takes place at a different time on a different computer and it's coded differently. And there's a lot of information that can be embedded with it to protect its security. Now, most of you who have transacted in land or tried to be in the administration systems, when you're dealing with issues of fraud, you basically interface with who moved it, when did they move it, where did they move it. If land has followed a particular transaction line that is correct, every time it's intercepted or moved, then it should uniquely report the same. So it makes land a secure component. But also, blockchain is not necessarily new to our country. It's something that has been done in Rwanda, in Georgia, in Sweden, and it has been also done in India, AI and blockchain. And now, let's enter Uganda, where I think we should envision the next generation land registration system that should actually have a biometric verification where we use fingerprint and facial recognition to make our transactions, and do blockchain record keeping and AI-powered anomaly detection to modernize our services. Some of you who are surveyors may have interfaced with overlaps over land, and you know how long that has taken to clean it up in the system. I know for a fact that it was recently piloted just to test what it can do in Mukono, and we had over 1,200 titles cancelled, and the ministry is really looking forward to this because it can actually monitor these fraud-like things. So in that way, you will have a lot of transactions secured. When we look at digitizing and securing our records, we've seen so many times a question as to how people got land titles in low-lying areas, in forest corridors, and eventually we will begin discussions of protect the environment, restore the environment, you know, to fit into global climate agendas, keep the forest corridor clear. But we know that AI has reached a time when it can do optical character recognition through machine learning to make sure that we can particularly identify the transactions that actually intersect with these particular corridors, and it can be the exact alarm that the police we've created and named Environmental Protection Police needs, so that when it's tampered with, then it should flag a message in the system, and this can be dealt with. Such safeguards are easier to implement when you can no longer debate that the system did not warn you, other than situations where we've had the lack of data driving the discussion on how we entered into a wetland and how the wetland had moved away during the dry season, and so it became a settlement pattern. These can well be arrested. My colleague there talked about real-time monitoring. So you imagine that land use and land use change is something that government interactively monitors after 2 or 5 years. But we are moving at a world, in a world where we see that universities themselves now even have satellites. The Ministry of Lands is in proper capacity to host a satellite that can pick up imagery. Put this imagery up against AI and it will always characterize what is happening on different land parcels. So by characterizing these different land parcels and their various impacts on the ecosystem, you can easily tell that Mabira is being encroached. Why should we discover after 1 year that, you know, 5, 6, 20, 60 acres have been cleared. Where are we, all of us? What are we doing as a country? Is it a lack of reporting mechanism? If there is a whistleblowing act, whistleblowers can also be influenced. Even us who would be whistleblowers fear for our lives. Technology won't. It won't fear for its life. It will literally flag that as an irregular activity through real-time monitoring. Let's talk of predictive planning. Most times our senior planners here keep zoning different areas for different activity. Different land over different time has been subject to new use. But what is driving that prediction? What is enabling us to make those predictions? Let's take an example of the Lake Victoria shores. Most of you about 10, 15 years ago were able to actually enjoy the beach. Today, most of them have been submerged in water. And I'm sure the people who bought land that time have lost quite a piece or a number of acres to the water rising up. Not that they are not aware of the buffer zones, but probably they have gotten permission to work in those buffer zones. Let's get to a point where, whereas UNIMA gives updates, but the Ministry of Lands should be able to update that whereas you are staying in this area, in 5 years we expect a rise in water and it will impact this much. And so this activity can only be given a temporary permit other than a permanent permit to be in that particular area. This should be data-driven, data-guided, and there's enough for us to do. We may have had the policies, we may have had the different narratives of protect party A, protect party B, but then who makes sure there is enough data to do that? Consider an example of the express penalty system in traffic. When it's there, it will take your picture, the speed at which you're driving, where you are, you'll even see an image of you doing that. So that debate, you can no longer debate, you didn't see me, your machine is spoiled. You know that debate is killed. We can import the same system when it comes to monitoring our different parcels of land and zoning within our country by actually simply deploying drone technology, AI technology and blockchain technology. We can also discuss the idea of streaming land transactions and service delivery. We know how much red tapeism is involved and the bureaucracy in the legal constraints and the rigor of changing from one title to another. But we can have self-executing legal agreements for land sales through these systems. We generally have a big duty to make the transaction of land as easy as possible, but also as transparent and accessible as possible. That way, especially in rural areas, we still have a chance to protect various ecosystems that actually speak to our climate. We cannot discuss further without looking at our vulnerable groups and their tenure security. Let's talk of people who have low tenure security, people in probably customary areas, probably people that are vulnerable to various impacts of climate change. When a landslide occurs, it sweeps away quite an area, and the things that you've been using to mark out your land, such as trees, major trees, roads, may all be taken along that same path. Whereas restoration can now be done by the easy GPS you picked around those particular points if they had formal rights or if they had an attempt to formalize their rights. In case they did not, then we see that these imagings that we've been using to support land registration or the AIs of this world can actually retrace these areas and recreate records of what was there. Being historical in nature, we can actually develop narratives where we trace the various activities that were on this land over certain long periods of time, and we make them immune to intrusions of corruption after major occurrences have happened. let's also look at data-driven policy planning. We've had policies, and Martha has given policy planning quite a good shot. But where is the data informing our policy? If you're going to look at research, for example, that informs the policy, a lot of it is lost in the descriptives, okay? Descriptives, how many women, how many acres, how many boys, what time, in the evening, in the afternoon. That's work for AI. Let's make our work more intensive. Let's study the narratives of people. The descriptives, let AI take care of those. If we've done formalizations, then we should easily be able to pick out an area and ask how many women own land in this area. What is the land use in this area and how has it been changing? What are the patterns involved? But if we are still doing our research to inform policy from the basics of descriptive research, then we are actually going to keep wasting a lot of time and we will not have the quality we require in our policy. I submit.
Thank you very much. A huge clap for Dr. Ivan. Doctor, I'll also give you your question as for the next round, but this time round I'd like to engage the audience a little bit more. But before that, Doctor, I like what you mentioned in terms of the alternative of using technology as a layer into overseeing good land administration. However, do you also believe that as a nation we are ready or we have adequate receptacles to receive this solution? For instance, is AI backed by legislation and policy in order to be used as an alternative land administrative measure? That is one. Number two, you know we have challenges of internet coverage, both in terms of actual coverage and also internet usage. And then number three, we have, of course, challenges of the cost of internet itself, even where it is available. And then, of course, number four, it is what I experienced in the conference a few years ago. We had gotten some colleagues from another country, and when everyone went on and on and on and on, describing a lot of challenges, and half of them were coming out of sheer dishonesty of people living within a community looking for the same solution to the challenge that is not being caused by wild animals but other people like them. Then the man started answering that maybe we need to go to a church first, and then after the church it will be easier for us to agree on the resolutions for this conference. So again, with all this AI and everything else, don't you think again there's something amiss among us, we as a people, in terms of having shallowness in honesty and of course disregard of public will over private profit? So please, if you can discuss that a little bit more. Members of the public, back to you. It's now your chance. If you can raise a few questions, put up your hand, and I'll ask one of my team members to reach out to you. But before you do that, I just want one or two people to help me with this small exercise. Can someone, either by your knowledge or research, quickly find out the land mass of Uganda in acres? Did anyone find that out? Land mass of Uganda in acres, total land mass. Can you put up your hand and answer? Land mass of Uganda in acres. Feel free to consult. It's an open book exam today. Yeah. Yes, you have the answer? Okay, please record for me this answer. Yes? Land mass of Uganda in acres?
It's 59.566 million acres.
59.566 million acres. Can anyone find out for me the population of Uganda as of today? There is a tool called the World Populometer. It keeps actually increasing population of every country by the second. Can anyone just consult for me and give me the figure there? World Population Meter. Just type in Uganda and give me that figure. 59 acres is all we have. And it's not increasing because we are not about to invade another country, are we? Yeah. We tried before and we were beaten. Now we are back. Yeah. What's the population? Sorry, 45? 45,8062 million, all right?
Billion.
No, for Uganda. For just Uganda. Population for Uganda. I know it's not, it's above. Yeah, these days all you have to do is buy data, isn't it?
6 billion.
48.6 million, all right? Can someone do for me a quick arithmetic? Divide the total acreage in the country by the total size of number of people. What is the figure there? Sorry, you have it? Anyone has it? 49 by 48. No, 59 by 48, right? It's slightly above 1, isn't it? Sorry, you have it? 1.0? 1.00? No. I just want to, I'm trying to be a dictator for a second. I'm going to distribute to all of you free land today. So I'm getting all the acres in the country, divide by the number of people so that you can take what belongs to you, isn't it? Yeah, because we are a democratic country that likes to live. What's the figure there? Please. I wish I'll deal with that. Just give me the figure. It's a free figure. It's like we're dividing the national cake to all of us. It is 1.2 acres, right? Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, if we got a benevolent dictator who misunderstood the notion of sharing the national cake and simply got this country and asked the best surveyor today to tell us how much land there is, and would say it is 59 million. And he would command and say, from henceforth, whoever has breath and is a Ugandan, I give you an equal share of this country. You would only get 1.2 what? 1.2 acres. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have more than 1 acre somewhere, you know that the rest belongs to what? The rest belongs to your neighbor. All right? Now, just imagine that notion. The rest belongs to who? To your neighbor, and they are going to come and collect. So, my dear panelists, hence the pressure on land. And by the way, I have not yet adjusted for water bodies. I have not yet adjusted for national parks. I have not yet adjusted for forests. I have not yet adjusted for big plantation private land owned by entities. I have not adjusted for wetlands. Now, if you adjust for that, your share comes down to half an acre, about 45 decimals. So you better even run faster to either get your 45 decimals or protect if you have more than. So ladies and gentlemen, that is where the pressure is coming from. And just simply understand it that way, because everyone else is looking for land to do everything else. And therefore, as scholars, anyone who asks you, what do you think is causing this pressure? People are not running mad. Just because the numbers are simply too high and the resource is simply too small and fixed. Hence, we need to have alternatives of what they have mentioned here, of increasing productivity of the same thing. Number 2, veering into non-land-based productive sectors. Number 3, considering going vertical. Number 4, obviously planning much better for the little land that we have. Number 5, increasing on the legal enforcement of what we need to do in order to use this little resource that we have. And number 6, of course, having a very strong enforcement over and above those Ugandans who think they deserve more than us, and yet they even leave what is left to us much less value, because they are being degraded. They are degrading what is would give us all productivity. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the basic statistic underscoring the very essence of this conference. I now open the floor to questions. Please feel free, ask questions of clarity, contribute, ask for more detail, give some explanation where you think you can, give us your perspective, such that all of us can live enriched. So my rapporteur, or rather my able assistant, please feel free I'd like to see some hands, researchers, students, and policymakers. I see 2 hands here. So please mention your name, the panelist you're directing your question to, and then of course the question itself. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I'm called Edrisa, and I would like to hear from Dr. Silva from Kenya, how your perspective on how the land administration functions of tenure, use, development of value, how they can be used or leveraged to support sustainable land management that is resilience to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Doctor, I think you got that. Next.
Thank you so much. I would like just to commend the moderator, who seems to be top-notch on the topic, and also appreciate the contribution from our panelists. I would like to come in and weigh in into the topic. One, this is the right time, but we are a bit late. For example, when you look at where other countries are in terms of the preparedness, adaptation strategies, and also moving into action, this is the wrong time we should be having a debate inside a hall, because people moved beyond the conference halls. They are already at action point, and they are looking for the solutions. When we look also at what solutions and opportunities we have, Africans, we are lucky because we are already talking about having the land, and we are looking at the impacts on it and how we can look for the solutions. So when I look at climate change impacts, they are very uncertain because every other time they are evolving. And I think we were so much worried about the climate change impact until the year 2020, when COVID-19 came, and it was a total game changer for all the countries on how you deal with your issues. One thing I want to encourage you in this all, and I thank God for Professor Jab, who is here with us. Apart from him and maybe 2 or 3, we are all Africans. I'm calling you to order that the solutions are not going to come from any other country. Climate change issues have become like the COVID-19 issues, which every nation had to come back as a nation to look for. How do we build resilience? How do we cope? How do we recover from the pandemic? The same thing happens to climate change. I look back from way back in 2015 when I was finishing my PhD, and it's like you were on your own when you're talking about the impacts, what is required, the solutions, climate proving, and all that being put together in an integrated system within our land complex, and I'll say bureaucratic land laws. And when I say bureaucratic, I'm looking at how many are they in each and every country, and what stops us from having a streamlined approach to the land laws. I come from Kenya, where you read this act, and before you are done, you are reading this one, and it is complicated, mixed up. And even I, as a person who did a first degree in surveying, studying land law, till today, lecturing in the same lecture theaters, I still find the land laws so intertwined and going round. When we talk about even the policy frameworks, the legal frameworks, they are not clear sometimes on where do we stop the policy and how do we come in to act. So I'm just rallying behind each and every effort and encouraging each and every one of us to do what you can do in your space. Those in the legal area, can you demystify the law? Can you make it simple? Can you communicate the law to people like you are communicating to newborn child who are learning how to speak? Those in the land sector, how can we have the land reforms in a more streamlined way? For example, when we talk about the climate change impacts, we are talking about things like ecological shift. In fact, I liked the discussion we had with Dr. Sereba and the driver when we were coming from the airport. And the driver said very important thing, that all this land, I'm surprised even some kind of foods we were growing, they don't grow anymore. And that is ecological shift. Back in Kenya, the areas which used to be the food baskets are no longer yielding anymore. We have done a lot of research in terms of using like multi-criteria analysis to look at the ecological shift and the new areas where now you can find the ecology to grow different types of crops. But is that enough? How are people willing to adopt the change from a positive perspective? Because we talk about the economic benefits of climate change. For example, green energy has been well adopted in Kenya, where we are saying, can we go green? People have realized, why should I keep on paying the high bills to Kenya Power when I can install the solar systems and I'm making use of it? So I'm rallying behind each and everyone, because when it comes to climate change impacts, everyone is affected and we are all players because everybody has something to do. And also when you come to responding to disasters, we usually say everybody has a role, because it's either you wake up, you run, or you find somebody to carry you with you. So can everybody try and do what we can do as Africans, because the solutions lie with us. I want to demystify also the thing about blockchain and AI, especially AI. We have been doing a lot of machine learning, a lot of predictions, but we were not calling them artificial intelligence. Actually, this word has come to bring some sort of misinterpretation of the things we've done. A lot of research has been done, especially when it comes to like remote sensing predictions, land use, land cover mapping, being able to look at how do you get the solution from ADVIs, computation of the carbon credits, and all that. So maybe we were not calling it AI, but can we now innovatively pick what is already existing in terms of the research we have done and we start commercializing our work? Because innovation and commercialization of our intellectual property is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A big hand of applause for the contributor. The panelists, I strongly encourage you, each of you, to pick an aspect or two, because her delivery was quite across. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me just take this opportunity to reach out, because I'm told we have an online presence. And so I had completely forgotten about them. Those online, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we are audible and you're able to follow every aspect of this dialogue. And on that matter, please check for me if there's anyone who has a question, comment, or otherwise online. Otherwise, there's someone at the back there. And then I see another question here. Did you have your hand up? No? And then this gentleman. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 in that order, and 5. And then we shall head back to the panel. Panelists, please don't forget the second round of discussion area I shared with each of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question arises from the same question of the theme, which talks of how can land administration, how can land administration systems adapt to the impacts of climate change? However, in reference to that, I've seen the biggest challenges always land tenure systems.
Sorry, please, your name, please, before you proceed. We want you to be captured in the minutes. Thank you.
And by the names Osele Samuel, staff surveyor, Palisa local government. My question is arising basically from the same theme, which talks about how can land administration systems adapt to the impacts of climate change while promoting sustainability. However, for us in local government, the biggest challenge has been land acquisition. And mainly it has been impacted on by the land tenure systems which are in place. However, basing on that, we are seeking a solution on how land administration and methods can be adopted to challenge amidst the challenges of financial solutions which are failing, which are a biggest challenge for local governments on land acquisition.
Okay, thank you. This table here, but just finish up with the gentleman behind that camera. There was someone there, then we can move to the front and close. Your name, please, and probably the organization you represent.
Thank you. I'm Alex Emron. I'm a land surveyor. I just have something for Martha. Something about, there's a concept called wetland restoration, call it regeneration. I don't know, as a country and as a ministry, how we are moving with it, because I would want to believe that most of the wetlands that have been lost, for example, we know them. But probably, how are we responding in effort probably to restore them, as has been implemented in other countries? And is it something that we are aggressively following? And then the other one is for Dr. Ivan. Always in making some of these decisions, one greatest need is in making decisions is data. I don't know how available is data to support decisions, and probably what can be done or what everyone else can do to support in that line. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, my name is Munj Christopher, a staff surveyor. My question goes to Madam Mugarura. One thing we should accept is that climate risks are also land risks, where we have seen flooding, drought, changes in sea level, and landslide, leaving so many people landless and also displacement. And in administration systems, we need institutional framework as a key. Currently in Uganda, we have so many institutions dealing with land, with overlapping mandates and also working in silos. So my question goes to you and says, how can we design this institutional framework that we are able to track, manage, and respond to different climate risks? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Mhumza is my name, and I'm a valuation surveyor. Mine is going to Dr. Bamweana. You've talked about the emerging technologies. As we see that these technologies are gaining traction globally, and Uganda has also expressed interest. You've told us, and we are also aware that blockchain has been piloted in Mukono. My question is, to what extent are Uganda's institutional structures, legal frameworks, and technological infrastructure prepared to enable blockchain integration? Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have someone on this table. Please, before I get to the comments online, let's exhaust the people in the room. Let me have that telephone, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, all the panelists. My first question is a general question. Any one of you can respond it. Really, I'm very, very surprising that we are talking, I mean, since a long time about the problems in land and related issues. We talk about the land conflict, climate change, and a number of problems related to land and related issues. So according to your view, when we come up with really solutions to overcome these problems, and when we stop to talk about these land and related problems? My second question goes to David. I think it can be answered by other panelists as well. You raised about the land acquisition. Just as we know, land by its nature is inelastic, and the need and the number of population increases from time to time. So the demand toward this land is increasing. So when the urban expands, it is natural, of course. It took the fertile land from that of the peri-urban landholders. even when the city is located along the rivers, the lakes, any other type of water sources, it affects highly that river or that lake, whatever it is. And you know, especially in countries where land is publicly owned, when the peri-urban farmers are really displaced because of this urban expansion, there is no any means of mechanism to resettle these displaced people. Their really nature is quite different from that of the urban. The compensation is extremely low, even that is extremely low, so as to sustain their life. So there's a number of problems really in the peri-urban areas in all, I can't say in all African countries. So really, what should be the mechanism to overcome such problem? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think we'll close with these two. I've got a question coming from Dr. Alan Mazimwe. Is that correct? Okay, all right. So the question is from an online participant. Please bear with the identity has been concealed, but the question is clearer. It is Dr. Ivan and Miss Martha. Kindly comment on implementation systems and governance in terms of all the policies and great ideas you have discussed, particularly focusing on the gaps. And then question 2, for which he does not indicate who it is directed to, but the content may suggest so. What are the current challenges in land management that AI and blockchain can solve? So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions. The panelists, feel free to combine them, but it will always be good to address each particular person who asked, especially if they are here by name, such that you can attract their attention in response and also for their rebuttal, if any. Thank you very much. So I'll start with Dr. Silva, and we'll go in the order in which you actually spoke to the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to respond and also to even conclude part of my presentation that I didn't quite finish because of time. While making reference to sustainable development goals, I think I only made mention to just one, SDG 1, about equity of land rights. Then we have SDG number 11 that talks about sustainable cities and communities. Then of course also we have SDG number 13 that talks about climate action. So, and indeed, these are key reference goals that any initiative towards sustainability should refer to. So, one other thing that I also wanted to mention is that currently, Kenya is reviewing its national land policy. And when I checked, among the key subjects that the previous or the current policy focused on that was completely absent is the issue of climate change. And now in the draft national land policy, actually climate change and adaptation is given attention. And of course, as you know, when did we start talking about SDGs? Just in the year 2015. And for Kenya, we had already had our national land policy from way back in 2009. So you can see the reason why it was sort of like an oversight. Now, having said that, so there is the question asked by my brother there. I think I will twin it with the question asked earlier about the opportunities that are there for the land administration to address climate change. And in particular, you mentioned the key key areas of land administration. Now, and I think I will give an example in each of those. Now, one key component of land administration is actually land tenure, right? So how can we mainstream, so to speak, climate change strategies so that as we work towards sustainable development? Now, at the time of land, call it adjudication or allocation of land rights, indeed, we can consider climate change. For example, if already we have information, otherwise data, about areas that are fragile, ecosystems that is, right? So even as we do land allocation, we make sure that these areas are not going to be allocated to anybody. A significant thing that missed in the earlier approach in our land administration. And by the way, I think, as you know, planning came along the way, even after we had started formalizing or registering our land. So during land registration, we need to make reference to existing information about ecosystems that need to be protected because they are fragile. So that is with regard to land tenure. What about land use planning? Equally, in fact, there's a statement I'll make at the end of all this regarding fiscal and land use planning. So when it comes to the planning aspect of land administration, we need enough information about the risk areas as a result of climate change, like flood risk, drought-prone areas. So if we have this information, we can ensure that we don't settle people in areas that are flood-prone. Or even on wetlands, if that information was there initially. And that then requires that while doing our planning, we have to be as comprehensive as we can, such that we have all the information that will guide any subsequent planning, land use planning. Then there is the land valuation and taxation as another component of land administration. Now, maybe I'll make reference to Kenya, the Kenyan case, which I think you can relate to your particular cases that you know. When it comes to, government gets revenue from land transactions. So when it comes to, for example, land sales and transfer, like if I have to transfer my land to you, the government makes some money out of that. Yeah, I think what they call the stamp duty, right? There is the stamp duty that is paid. There is also the capital gains tax that is levied on any land that is, or any land and property that is the subject of transfer. So what we have is a uniform taxation percentage. So in the agricultural, otherwise rural areas, the percentage, I think it's 2.5% if I'm not mistaken. So depending on the value of land, that the money that has exchanged, 2.5% is the stamp duty. Otherwise, in the urban areas, again, I hope I'm not mistaken on this, it's 4%. So you pay 4% to the government to enable the change of ownership. Now, so what could happen to mainstream or to consider climate change is, for example, to differentiate those percentages. Yeah, if an area generally is considered to be prone to the vagaries of climate change, then we can vary, for example, from the 2.5% to 1%, or from 4% to 2% in urban areas. So that's what I would suggest. Then, lastly but not the least, sorry, I think my time again, the land development aspect. What has been there is basically development control, yeah, making sure that the people don't build whatever. But now we need to factor in the element of ecological sustainability, right? Even as we enforce any development control. Then I will say something, I don't know whether this I should say, but let me say. And this is, especially much of Europe, there is a tax that is levied. I think Prof. Yapu can maybe at some point, if necessary, to confirm this, that is levied at the parcel level, depending on how much of that parcel is paved. Yeah, if you have paved all of it, then you pay some tax. But if some percentage, so there is some percentage, otherwise they call it plot level taxation, right? So that is to ensure that you don't do the pavement like the way we've done in most of our cities. We need to have permeable pavements to allow water to infiltrate into the ground to recharge the ground water. Then the other one, I think this has been mentioned, instead of going horizontal, we now should go vertical. That is vertical development. And in closing, I'll not say it again, it's just the closing on this. The reference has been made to physical and land use planning, and the statement I wanted to make, which I promised earlier, is that some friends of mine who are planners, they say, it is the planners who create value when it comes to land. So when an area is planned, then all of a sudden the value of land increases. And in all this, you come to realize that planning is primary. Yeah? As much as it was not part of our practice in land administration. But then, now you said there are these 4 components. Land administration, if you just limit it to those 4 functions of land administration, you will miss the point, and this is where perhaps we may miss it. Because we have other sectors that are not necessarily primary actors when it comes to land administration. For example, we have the water, the utilities, the forest, and all this. So they have no opportunity to provide information into the land administration system. And that is why then it is important that beyond or over and above the land information systems that we have established, we have a framework that allows sectors to share information. And here I'm trying to underline the national spatial data infrastructure that allows these other sectors to make available their data that can then be useful in land administration. I think, let me stop there, but I think there are some questions I have not answered that came from the audience.
Okay, for the sake, because we are all here for the audience, I'm going to add you just 2 minutes to just address what you think you haven't addressed in terms of the question.
Thank you. There was a question about land administration, land acquisition. So land acquisition, there was that question. What should be the solution to land acquisition? Of course, we cannot run away from acquiring land. We acquire land as our urban centers extend beyond the initial boundaries. We need land as a result of urban development. We need to acquire land for the purpose of infrastructure development. We need to acquire land for the purpose of environmental conservation. Maybe, I don't know whether I should make reference to the case of Tanzania, the northern part of Tanzania, when people were evicted from the forest, isn't it? I think what the objective, I think, that we read was about conservation of the environment. So this one we cannot run away from. But we find ourselves in this situation that we have to acquire land simply because from the onset, we did not do planning, right? So because when, in fact, I appreciated from the presentations we've had in the previous days, where Uganda has this concept of rapid planning appraisal, right? So at least you can do a quick assessment so that at least you know what you need in particular or with regard to public land. So in advance, you already have this information that we will need to do a water dam here, right? So already that land is therefore already reserved for the purpose of development of the dam. We will need to extend our railway network, or we shall have a road here in future, yeah? Then that land is already reserved. So that's why planning, again, is very important that it be done in a more comprehensive way so that it is not just localized, so that then we look at this thing comprehensively to reduce the possibilities and the need for acquiring land to displace people, which should be avoided as much as possible. Let me leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joanita?
Thank you, and I'll start with, I think, the last comment on solutions. So I'm a very good believer that, also linking it with what my sister there mentioned of who is making the research, are we engaging community in this research? Not only to have exploitative research, but also understanding that they have data that they can give us to inform either policy, decision making, and etc. So I believe that societies or communities also have indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge systems that can enable us to create solutions towards climate resilience. And how are we doing that to get to them instead of, you know, carrying, oh, this is what sustainability looks like, to what do you think sustainability should look like, getting practices from what they traditionally used to do to what they can now do with the formal knowledge. So I think it's important for us to think about solutions in that angle. And when you talk about also the successful examples, like you've mentioned, that I also highlight, is we've had so many organizations also trying to think through and push for different things. One is agroforestry, as little or small as it looks. Communities are trying to do agroforestry, agroecology, climate smart solutions, and etc. But also we know that there are exploitative practices that have started coming into communities in form of carbon credits. I know there must be people that are super interested in this, but then our communities, are we just doing the land grabbing, or are they actually benefiting from the carbon credits or the markets? Or as they're planting their trees, does it even have an impact on food that they have to get? Because I know that for smallholder farmers that are in different communities, that they have small pieces of land, they're also even struggling to find land to grow food. But now when we talk about carbon credits and how we want to use land in form of planting trees, we are trying to tell them to plant trees to get money. But at the end of the day, they are losing land that they can use to produce food. What does it even mean for a country? Do you want to have a better negotiation? Do we want to engage these farmers in bargaining on the rates, or are we just pushing things down the community and trying to make it seem like we know all that they need? So it's just to understand that there are different things that we're doing under climate resilience, but how are we carrying the communities with us? It's not just about securing land rights for people, but they should be in position to use that land to produce things. They should use that land for their livelihood, and etc. So as we talk about land rights, securing land, we also think about governance. How are women, how are communities engaging in governing land that is communally owned? How are they involved in the entire process? I'll still take us back to engaging from processes, the fast process of planning to until implementation, and also monitoring. How are we taking them through the journey of this is what we're supposed to do, and this is how we're going to engage you during the planning, this is how it looks like during the monitoring or implementation, and etc. So trying to think about all of this in this angle creates successful ways of how to use land sustainably, but also build resilience of these communities. We've talked about climate change and how it's hitting the communities that are vulnerable most, but we are not talking about how those particular communities also have solutions that are already informing adaptation efforts. When you talk about the climate adaptation plans for countries, I know for Uganda, I think there is one on agriculture already. How is it getting smallholder farmers into the narrative? How is it bringing large-scale farmers in different communities into the narrative? And are we also getting involved as practitioners, as professionals, as scholars in land into this conversation on climate adaptation? Or do we think that this is just basically things that we need to also discuss as us, and then climate people will also discuss when it comes to climate adaptation? So I think it's very important for us to have, you know, a multi-stakeholder planning, multi-stakeholder partnerships. Multi-stakeholder also meaning that traditional leaders need to be in the room, meaning that cultural leaders need to be there, religious leaders need to be there, because they form an important aspect of what then translates into moving things in their different communities. And we've seen also in Uganda where women have started getting land, which is beautiful, but then what does it mean? Which kind of land are they getting? Are they cognizant of this is a wetland and I shouldn't get land from here, or our corruption is allowing us to get that? And how do we call out such things in case wetlands are being encroached on? Are we still sitting and saying this is not supposed to be my work? Or as communities, we are also trying as much as possible to push for conservation in our different angles, in our different areas where we are. We have wetlands that are being encroached on by people because of profit, but also just understanding that it's a responsibility for all of us. If, for example, I'll just give an example. We know that Renzori, the company is somewhere in a former wetland, and we are comfortably taking our Renzori on these tables, right? We are actually trying to be gatekeepers of this system that is taking over key ecosystems, wondering if all wetlands disappeared in Kampala, how it would look like. For a country that has all these water bodies, that is depending on all these wetlands, with filtration, with flood control and all of that, what would happen? And then, in every class of people where you are, may be rich enough to afford to fly to another country when a big flood happens, but will you carry your entire relatives with you? What does that even look like? So just to think about, if you are talking about wetlands, if you are talking about parks, I know of the crude oil conversation also going on. As practitioners, what's going on with the crude oil pipeline and its effect on communities with land and compensation? What's going on there? Who is getting the money from the crude oil pipeline that is being put up? Is it us thinking about we're just going to get profit from this particular initiative? Or how is it sustainably supporting communities that are living within those particular communities? So thinking about all of these things, not to really feel like it's a prophesying doom in some way, but just to understand that climate change is here, and it's a responsibility for all of us to take care of it. We either be gatekeepers of these by demanding for a lot of water in Renzori water bottles, or decide to vote with our money to say, I won't do that because they took over wetland. So just to think about that, and just to realize that in every decision that we are going to be taking, be it voting with your cash, be it supporting a certain community that is being evicted from an area, be it understanding the intersectionality of climate change, land, and gender, or whatsoever. Just think about the intersectionalities. We talked about persons living with disability. We talked about the elderly. Not so many people are fighting for the elderly people and children, but they're actually at the lowest spectrum of things. When things happen, when there's a shock, their resilience is even lower. So when you talk about climate resilience, when you talk about trying to adapt to climate change, it's a lot into context, but also understanding that land as a resource is the most important for most of the communities, because when they lose it, they're losing their livelihood, they're losing their dignity, they're losing their identity, they're losing their culture. And we are losing Africa as a continent, because that is what feeds us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Martha?
Thank you, audience, for your questions. I would like to start with the first question on wetland restoration efforts. Recently, I think we are all party to the evictions, or we all saw what happened at Lubigi. And NEMA was heavily criticized for evicting people in the wetlands. But when you look at it from the overall land use plans for Kampala City, the Lubigi wetland system is the only wetland system we are left with tangible one that we are left with in the capital city. It's shared with the Wakiso and Kampala. So the eviction was maybe a trigger to show that there is even much worse happening in other cities that has not been documented, that has not been understood, and that has not had an impact on maybe the water table for that particular city, or the other potential impacts that arise from encroachment on this wetland. So for me, I think it was a bittersweet kind of happening, but it has shown us something that we need to do, that in conservation we might need to use a little bit of force to protect. And arising from that Lubigi eviction, Government of Uganda through the Ministry of Water and Environment with support from GI has actually completed a feasibility study for an eco park in Lubigi. So there are 4 sections on the Lubigi wetland system, but 2 sections of that whole segment. There are 5 sectors, but at least 2 are going to be designed into an eco park. These are some of the solutions arising out of the unfortunate, eviction, to demonstrate that we need to conserve these wetlands as wise use for the urban areas. And even NEMA has gone ahead to promote wise use conservation of wetlands in the districts. And we have very good examples of wise use wetlands in Kamwenge district. Some are starting up in Kabale district. And we know all that is arising from the recent gazette of wetlands that was published. We now know where the wetlands, the mapped wetlands by government are. So conservation is really an effort that must be seen, must be felt, and unfortunately sometimes it will knock on it will disturb some people, but it is a necessary action, because when we lose these systems, really we lose the lungs for our urban areas. There will be no place to breathe, to get fresh water, to get biodiversity as part of the urban systems that we have, the settlement areas. Now the second question on the second question, I believe, was from the staff surveyor on institutionalizing an institutional framework, I believe. And I think I will start on, I'll give 2 examples of institutional frameworks that are in place. For instance, from the spatial planning perspective, the institutional framework is through PDPs. The physical development plans are a framework to plan the use of land for development, for infrastructure, for the environment, all forms of land use. Now, institutional, it's led by government and devolved at the local government. That's the institutional part. But the framework itself is the PDP. Unfortunately, we do not have enough frameworks, I would say. The PDP coverage that we have in Uganda, we have one national physical development plan, that is the overarching physical planning framework. We have 2 regional physical development plans, and that one is the Albertine Graben physical development plan, which covers the oil region. So we anticipated that there will be various activities arising from the oil extraction in the Albertine region, and the PDP was prepared so that at least the land use is guided as this major activity on oil activities arises. But we need to check and see to what extent the plan is guiding the development on the ground. The second one is in the Northern Uganda Economic Corridor, PDP, which has guided and has given birth to so many development projects in Northern Uganda, like Dr. Deep. Most of the projects follow the PDP of that Northern Uganda Economic Corridor. So I'm just saying that these frameworks from the spatial perspective are in place, but we need to do more, because when you look at the Fiscal Planning Act, it says this whole country is a planning area. But in terms of coverage, like I've said, we have the national one, we have 2 regional ones, we have 18 district PDPs out of 135. We have 4 city PDPs out of 11 cities. We have 17 PDPs out of 31 municipalities. We have 58 PDPs out of the needed ones are 580 because those are the number of town councils we have. And at the local level, which would be the sub-county level, we have 342. And yet in this country, we have 2,184 PDPs. So in terms of performance of framework, spatial planning, we are standing at 15%, which is low. When you look at the frameworks on mapping, because we are still addressing the issue of the land management system, where we have land administration, mapping, and then spatial planning. In terms of where you come from, the surveying area, where you're looking at mapping and cadastral mapping, the framework I think that you need now, the frameworks that you have in place, which are the guidelines that you follow, should have a climate risk element integrated. Similarly, for the fiscal planning, we have integrated climate risk into our planning frameworks, so that now we plan for the projected climatic changes. My question to you now would be, are we also in our surveying and mapping planning with those considerations in mind? And he had ably also explained that to us earlier, that these frameworks are guides. They are generally guides, but institutionally they are led by either central government or professional bodies. And we say to ourselves, are we very mindful of the climate risks? I hope that has answered your question. Then the third question I think I got was on the gaps, the policy gaps. I think this was an online respondent. Yes, there are policy gaps. We acknowledge these. We have policy gaps in terms of tenure insecurity. We still have a high percentage of customary land that is not titled, and this is definitely raises the risk on tenure, on development, because people are unable to secure their development agenda because they lack security of tenure. We do have gaps in policy due to weak implementation. Our policies are well laid out, they are strategic in nature, they tick all the boxes. But when it comes to implementing a policy through programs, plans, and actions, it's a different outlay altogether. I do not know where the biggest challenge is, but the truth is that we have weak implementation of our policy. And on the issue of data, yes, we have very big data gaps, because you see, policy is informed by data, and that data has to really be thoroughly and comprehensively gathered, and also even defended in cases where you find that the data is not documented in the national records, but it is existing. For instance, on slums, if we say we have slums in Uganda, have we actually identified where these slums are? Have we mapped them out? Are they gazetted as informal settlements, so that we can have a responsive policy to address the slums? That really is a gap. I'd like to stop on those three questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Ivan, last but not least.
I thank the panelists. I think they have covered much of the scope. I will just add, the questions to me have largely been, are institutions ready, legal frameworks ready, our internet coverage, are we ready for the things you're talking about? Technology is disruptive. It forces itself on the agenda every other day. It's forged in the corridors of legal constraints, in the gaps of legal agendas. It's forged for modes of ease. And so in itself, it does not always wait for the law. I tell you, for example, that there is no law to date that supports surveyors using differential GPS networks to submit their titles in Uganda. But we are way past the equipment that is in the law for us to use. There's no guideline on how photogrammetry should be carried out. We are way past that. Today people are even having drones. If the law was written yesterday on planes, today we are going to be having drones. So technology in itself will not wait. And I tell you that if there's a legal framework, one way you know that you are progressing as a country is if the technology you use is able to leapfrog that legal framework and call for a new one. That's the reason why we vote our MPs and all those other people. That should be their cause. Are we ready as a country? I think it's us to prioritize what's important. Okay, technology comes in with cost-cutting effects in the long term, though it may be expensive in the short run. Now there's a habit of fast resisting technology because most of our jobs are in manual mode, so it will be eliminating certain jobs. Okay, so if we say that it will ease the legal frameworks that we have to go through, a lot of people thrive on the bureaucracies of the law, the bureaucracies of the system, and so they will resist these technological hypes. But it is important that we begin to acknowledge them, especially when we are being stalked by the issues of climate change. Climate action, by IPCC definition, is to global entities as it is to governments, nations, institutions, homes, and to you as an individual. My neighbor Joanit has already actioned us, has already moved us to action. Are you going to be the one guarding these entities that are actually affecting the climate? Are you going to be the one procuring from them? Are you going to be the one enabling them? Today, as we speak about this intervention, can it be sustainable? The question should come to you first as an individual. What are you doing about it? You're going to find that, for example, government has schools, government schools, and all of them still use firewood. And yet the idea is that government is fighting cutting wood, government is, why aren't they using bio fuel? Why aren't they using that? That will be the first intervention, because most consumption is going to go towards that side. So as an individual, have you done the same in your home? Have you done the same for your parents? We keep tossing these big questions to the scholars, to the policy, to the institutions, but you as an individual, how have you moved? When you realize that you have resistance or things that inhibit your movement, then you will know how easy it is to adopt these technologies to address these issues. I beg to submit.
Round of applause for our panelists for keeping time. And I have some exciting news. Dr. Sengendo and his able colleague, Dr. Lydia, say that if I'm able to stop before 5 o'clock, without there being a complaint from any of you, they're going to take us for a cocktail. Is anyone interested in a cocktail? Yeah, so thank you very much. Again, I don't want to leave any question on the floor. Is there anyone with a burning issue? Okay, if there is none, then I would like the panelists, do you think there's anything else you want to say in 2 minutes in closure? Or do you think you've already wrapped it up?
We can close.
Okay, so all of us I'll start with Ivan. Ivan, in closure, 2 minutes only. Otherwise, then people might start throwing shoes at you because you'll be blocking the
I know that
the cocktail.
We now are at a point where we are standing between food and knowledge. But I would like us to move to a point where we begin to discard static land registries to dynamic land registries if we are to actually answer this question. Consider that static land registries have fixed record of land ownership, boundaries and rights. Okay, they are infrequent, they are centralized, and they have slow decision making. In fact, the Ministry of Lands has tried so much to make this online as the intervention. But if we adopted a dynamic land registry, then it would be alive. Imagine that every time you did a search on your title, you don't just get the ownership profile, but you get the land use profile of your land, and you get the climate profile of your land. And it is incremental in nature. Every year, every other month, there is such a record on your land. This would go a long way in actually dealing with issues such as buying in dry season. If it was dynamic enough, it would also be language sensitive. A lot of people hold documents of land ownership and they are written in English and they bear no understanding of what they hold. They do not communicate any ecological shift. They do not hold any previous, any idea of previous events that may have happened on that land. They are events and not processes. So you, in essence, do not know what has been happening on that particular land that you're trying to procure. So if we are to answer things to do with climate, anyone at any one particular time should actually be able to appreciate the changes that have been happening on their land. Also, we have to get to a point where most of government information can be channeled per the land we hold. Imagine we keep getting weather forecasts, but imagine we were getting them on the parcels of land we hold. How beautiful would it be if we are to deal with land administration and resilience and sustainability if we are going to infuse these things locally? How are we dealing with shifts in settlement due to patterns of resource scarcity if we are not actually able to deal with such questions? So for me, that becomes fundamental. And just to give my parting shots so that I relax for the food as well. Like I said in the beginning, that land for us is no longer just a commodity or a boundary, it's a lifeline. Basically defining where our people live, grow, build, and preserve their nature. But these land systems on which we've put our people are under immense pressure and rapid urbanization, environmental degradation, and they are stoked by the issues of climate change. But we cannot talk about climate resilience without transforming land governance. And technology will be an important player. My urge to people is that technology is not a luxury, especially here in Africa. We have to begin looking at it as a catalyst for equity and survival. These emerging technologies offer us an opportunity to reimagine land administration. The doctor from Kenya said AI has been around in different forms. I believe that today it's giving us an opportunity to rediscuss the issues of land administration and move them from being just transparent, rather than corruptible, predictive, rather than reactive, inclusive, rather than exclusive, and dynamic, rather than static. This will allow us a second chance to secure land rights, to be aware of the rights in regards to gender, to monitor our environmental change, predict risks, and deliver faster and more accountable public solutions. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you're not clapping for this interesting submission. I like the part of the dynamic land registry, and I hope someone picks that up because that's a huge area for research and innovation. Next, please, we'll have Dr. David.
Yeah, I think these are my last points. Two of them. The first one is that at the moment, the wildebeests are migrating from Tanzania, Serengeti, crossing over to Kenya. So they will stay in Kenya until December, and then they will cross back to Serengeti in Tanzania. So what I'm not sure, of course, this has been highlighted in the recent years, and it is a spectacle in terms of tourism. So what I'm not sure is whether this used to happen 100, 200 years ago. But of course, you can attribute the migration to climate change, and of course, actions of the human beings. They have encroached into the ecosystems of the wildlife. So from the Tanzanian side, they may have encroached so much into the Serengeti, so then they cross over to Kenya. And then as they are in Kenya, they also find a limitation that they can't move further. So they are operating within that ecosystem. Now, if Kenya decided to simply do their fiscal and land use planning that only terminates at the boundary between Kenya and Tanzania, and by the way, that boundary is a straight line that does not recognize the movement of animals, then it can be a disaster. Yeah, because if we said this is the boundary, no animal citizens should cross over. So what I'm trying to highlight is the cross-country or cross-border fiscal and land use planning, so that we don't bring that problem. So I think it's something that we should consider in our policies. I think the same with, of course, Uganda is also a neighbor to Kenya. I hear in the news that there is intention to have a standard gauge railway between Kenya and Uganda. So if on the Kenyan side they just do the planning of the line without regard to the planning from the Ugandan side, you will end up with a situation whereby one country at some point may be forced to do land acquisition. So still again emphasizing the cross-border fiscal and land use planning. So I don't know whether currently it happens. So then the other last point, I said two. The last one is since this climate change has been a subject of interest, and many other people have come into that space to provide support. I'm sure in the last 2-3 years we've been hearing of the carbon credits and the carbon market, right? So, and when you try to investigate and find out, you realize that much of the support goes to the agriculture sector. So again, as an opportunity for the land administration sector, is to see how we can tap into that funding or support that is now available. And with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite Joanita to deliver her parting shot.
I think for me, just a few words on gender again. I would say that gender equality in land governance is not merely a social justice issue, it is climate resilience. And we need to empower as many women as possible in the field of built environment as well, but also in different communities to be able to secure land, but also to be involved in the processes, high-level processes, to engage as many women as possible, to be able to take on leadership in these spaces. But also we need to know that women are the custodians of the land. And without their engagement, we will not be talking a lot about resilience. So we need to be able to support the custodians of the land in whichever way that we can to build resilient communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanita. And then last but not least, Miss Martha.
Thank you very much. Every after conversation, I usually ask myself, what is the value in this conversation? And I believe from the question that has been set for this conference, I think the value in ensuring that our land administrative systems are resilient to climate change are very critical. And they are critical because we can only increase climate resilience through informed land use planning. Previously, our land use planning was just to set maybe a stage, I would say. Take it like you're setting up this area for a wedding. So you have the front, which is the CBD, then you have the chairs, so we have residential there, we have commercial there, we have industrial there, and other uses. But that is no longer critical because climate is here. The climate shocks are getting real and heavier for us to take on. And therefore we need to ask ourselves, as we set this stage, are we actually thinking about the current and future risks due to climate, and why therefore we should put that setting there for industrial, but in the next 50 years it will not be there, well knowing that this has been set in a floodplain zone. We are going to lose property and lives. I think that thinking has to change. We need to rethink how we are setting our development patterns and include risk, a risk-informed plan, a risk-informed framework for us to operate in is very critical to reduce losses, damages, and also to have a more lively economy. I think the value also in this conversation today is that we can reduce land conflicts and tenure insecurity. From the question that was posed to us earlier on wetlands, the conflicts are rising because we did not regard wetlands as a critical, valuable asset in our setting. For us, we want to grow, we want to urbanize, but we think the wetlands are not important. But it's bringing in conflict in the sense that people think the land is cheap there and they are creating settlements there, but they are losing their lives at the end of the day. So we need to reduce these conflicts by being able to say, look, there are these places that are off bounds for us to develop on. These include the wetlands, and definitely they have a value for us as a population, because we need water, we need biodiversity, we need clean air, and that is the value that the wetlands give us. Lastly, when we have this climate resilience integrated in our land administrative systems, I believe we can enhance our green investment readiness, because most of the funding that is coming for green projects is because, again, the systems have not, the land administrative systems have not taken care of the climate risks. So there is a basket of funds out there that we want to tap into, but prior to getting there, we have not climate-proofed our systems of mapping, our planning systems, our codes that are supposed to help us in development, and therefore we cannot access those funds. So this conversation is very valuable to me today, because I believe if we do this, then we can have sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I were to give marks to this panel, and forgive me if I give anyone, if I'm judgmental, but David would get 99.5. Martha would get 99.5. Ivan would get 99 and 2/4. And Joanita would get 99 and what? And 4/8. You people have forgotten your mathematics. Mr. Chairman, my duty now is to try and wrap everything we have discussed into some kind of strategy to inform the next 12 months. And I would like to share with you what I found in Singapore in 2017 when I visited them on some on a conference, but I was also trying to find out what has built that country. I found out that they had a secret that they used in their planning, in all their planning meetings, at whatever level. They simply asked everyone who was contributing either a question, a comment, an idea, or anything, to first begin by indicating to everyone in front of them whether whatever they were going to say was going to be relevant 100 years from when they were saying it. Yeah? Is it relevant 100 years from now? If you don't have that answer, keep quiet until you have that answer. Ladies and gentlemen, Singapore now is a #1 country in terms of happiness. There is no, the Singaporeans are the only citizen in this country who don't need a visa to go to any other country. But also, it also happens to be the least demanding travel citizenry because they have nowhere else to go. There's nothing you can show them that they don't have at home. And by the way, even if you wake up now and pack a toothbrush, just pay for a ticket at Emirates or whichever airline you want, enter Singapore freely. They are not afraid of you coming. Can you imagine the level of confidence? So that is what it means to build a country and be proud of it and own it. Ladies and gentlemen, if I stand towards 5, you start throwing stones because I'll be affecting your cocktail. #1, we seem to have agreed that we should work towards pooling data such that conferences like these are very easy for us to contribute to, and studies and knowledge is easy to share and find amongst various players that are within the land administration spectrum. #2, and this I want to borrow from the words and the urge by our Vice Chancellor this morning or this afternoon, but before lunch, who mentioned that we have started a good journey, but we have a long way to go. I'd like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that even in one of the major tertiary institutions we have in the country, which is Makerere University, we've got year in, year out potential resources for research. Why aren't we using them on a common agenda? Madam Martha has told you PDP coverage, which is physical development plan coverage for the country, is at 15%. What stops the physical planning students at university? On a year in, year out, going on to these sub-counties, onto these town boards, into these municipalities, and so on and so forth, and delivering physical planning while they are tertiary training, they are delivering. And for us at this level, we have so many experts in here, in the ministry, and so on and so forth. We give them support. Because those are the next physical planners for the next generation themselves. So that, again, is what we are calling crowd-based research with a common portal, using a common agenda, and using resources that we have put together. I think that's also a worthy way forward and resolution. And many people have indicated that they wish to know and wish to see a more institutionally interactive work environment in the land administration space. And so what do we need to do? All of us. That's why we kept asking you, please introduce yourself and where you come from. Such that when we're writing the minutes, we're able to tell that we have representation from various entities. I'm happy to have heard from DSs, from different MSOs in the country. The ministry is here, the university is here, so many agents are here, external participants are here. So that's a very good start in trying to work towards that. Ladies and gentlemen, I have attended several conferences over the years. But what I've found to be more effective is where you have what you call thematic areas within the general space that we are trying to influence. So for example, the Advances in Geomatic Research Conference must have a thematic area. Tomorrow you won't be start dealing with early child marriage, isn't it? You're going to remain focused in issues to do with this. Yeah? And the East African Land Administrative Network also has thematic areas. So is it possible that rather than just have another theme every other year, different discussions, lamentations, and we simply close and go back, can we have thematic groups that are working groups, that are standing, and we charge them with a contribution, a direction, and therefore give them a target for the next conference? The themes will not move, but the cores of what we want to shift will remain in place. So I request that you consider that, we draw thematic areas, and we know that we are moving certain mountains in one direction, and where they are stuck, we know how to help them. That being the case, then after we've drawn those thematic areas, we then define working groups which will have internal management, a chairperson and different groups representing different areas, the way we think that should be done. I think that's also one or two recommendations that would be interesting. Another recommendation that seems to have come through is the level of publication and dissemination of issues. Yeah, at a group like this, representing 45 or 48 million people, we should be the best brains on land administration matters. And therefore, even amongst us, we should have and be relying on the best and most up-to-date information. But where do you get it? Where that is holistic, that has been contributed to by recognized researchers, and that we can rely on to communicate to others and make decisions. So I think it's incumbent on the secretariat of this conference to create a permanent standing group whose role would be to do this kind of work. And please don't ask me budget, because like I said, we have free labor and free spaces in the departments we are running in public entities and individuals who are seeking us or who are seeking training from us. On the issue of AI, I noticed that could have raised, or actually did raise, quite a bit of concern. My advice to you, and I think everyone will agree with me, is the easiest way to get things done is by starting something up. So if you can come up with a closed environment, do a pilot project, and illustrate the AI abilities within your means, and use that to push for a grant, you should be able to, in the next conference, not tell us about possibilities, but tell us about the findings of a pilot and how you think the challenges can be underscored and the advantages can be spread towards all over the nation. On the PDPs, I think that issue, everyone has taken note. Physical development plans, 15% coverage is too low for 2025. I almost asked you, if it wasn't for time, on what it needs to take for us to have a PDP in place, the steps and processes, and how this conference can contribute. But I'm sure you can give that as a comment to the rapporteuring team, which they can keep and share with us in due course. There's an issue of increased or unabated dependence on land. Again, I think as a nation that is progressive, I'm happy that you mentioned issues to do with PDM, but there's a concern that we must be able to start pushing towards and beyond traditional reliance on land as a resource in the way it was given to us by nature. And the clear pressures are what are indicated by the simple statistic I shared with you, and the alternatives are many. Alternatives are many. There are very many countries which have proven that we can use land as a launchpad into very many other sectors. All we have to do is, again, do it, but with a little bit of planning. I know that is not our room, but it's high time that reliance on land as a basic resource starts shifting, and masses of pockets of employment for our young people start getting into other areas like manufacturing, like technology, like services, and so on and so forth. Someone mentioned that charity begins at home. Are we champions of climate change ourselves? And what I thought of that was that if it were possible, and I was a small climate god, I would bring the climate Bible, have all of you raise your right hands, and convert you immediately into climate warriors, and charge you with the duty to go and hunt as many climate warriors as a following, such that in the next conference, we are seeing much more people than they are here, and not only attendees, but people who are telling us how much bounty they have saved or they have made, and how many conversions they have made for the climate. So I think it is very clear that we should all be climate conscious, and that we should do it in our places of work, our places of play, and our places where we live. So what energy are you using to cook? What energy are you using to... And I'm happy the conference here didn't have a lot of leaflets, because I think you recognize that printing is not of much value. They've challenged us on the subject of water. I don't know, maybe we shall pack our water the next time that we have a conference in nice glass bottles, but we need to do anything to prove that we are climate warriors. The next is about, I really like the point of the dynamic land registry, and I wish you could push that any further. For me, I'm a bit old now. You can see this is not gray hair, by the way. I just live near someone who has a maize mill. So whenever I'm crossing, it gets stuck in my head. The last one is cross-border PDPs. I think it's very important because at the end of the day, climate does not know national boundaries, and nature does not know national boundaries. But I think the very last and most important recommendation for today's meeting, and I appeal to Dr. Sengendo and Madam Lydia there, is that the next moderator should be who for the next conference? The next moderator should remain myself, isn't it? Thank you very much. Doctor, please take over. I would like you to give a big hand of applause to our panelists today. And I think allow them to come down and sit, you know, at our own level here as we prepare for the next event of the day.
Before you leave,
thank you very much.
request that you take a group photo with the moderator. You can stand in front here.
Okay, thank you very much and good evening.
Another round of applause to Mr. Alan Mugisha for really handling this public dialogue, and we can assure you that we will come up with a policy brief which you will share with the ministry to try to take this forward. And as you said, we already within the East African Land Administration Network have working groups actually doing research and providing actionable solutions to these challenges. So this is something we're already doing. So another round of applause to our panel and to our moderator for doing a wonderful job. I have only two announcements. One, I want you to please scan this QR code with your phones, and you'll get a copy of the program for the conference tomorrow. Please scan and you'll get a copy of the program for tomorrow. Is it working? I want to be sure that it is working. Once you scan it, you should be able to get a copy of the program tomorrow. Is it working? Okay, so that is the program. Have a look at it. The conference will be at Kabila Country Club. For our visitors, that's about 20 minutes from here. You can even walk. Very near here. It will start at 8, and we expect the Honorable Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to officially open it, and we'll have very interesting discussions there, as you see on the program, so you can see where you want to be, in which we will have 2 breakout sessions, and you'll choose where you want to be, what you want to learn about. And on that code tomorrow, by the time tomorrow you reach tomorrow, we will have a book of accessible from that code, which you can see what have people written, what have researched. I want to thank you for sparing this afternoon to be with us here. Let's clap for ourselves. And with that, as Mr. Alan told you, the cocktail will be on Friday. So today, we can go home and think about this thing. Because tomorrow, I want you to come when you are fresh and you are still thinking about these things that we've talked about here. And on Friday, when we close and there's nothing to do, we can then have a cocktail and, and celebrate. So thank you very much for being here. I wish you a nice evening, and may God protect you. Thank you.